Well, on to the big spotlight for tonight. The 7th Pay Commission has submitted its report to the Finance Minister. The Commission, which is set up once every 10 years to revise the salary structure for central government staff. The Commission is proposing a hefty pay hike of 23.55% for around 48 lakh employees and 55 lakh pensioners. This includes a 16% hike in the basic pay, a 130% hike in housing allowance, and a 26% hike in pension. Now, this will mean the centre will have to shell out over 1 lakh crore rupees in FY17, which will amount to about 0.65% of the GDP. The panel, importantly, has also proposed one rank one pension for all central government employees. In fact, on that story, we are now joined by, in the studio with me is Colonel ANIL KAUL, and on the phone line we'll also be joined by AJAI SHUKLA. Let me come to you first, Colonel KAUL, because it seems that this panel has tried to make an exception as far as the armed forces are concerned. They have accepted that you cannot have a one-size-fits-all for everyone. They have their own unique requirements. And if I were to give you one specific example, they have proposed dispensing of the separate pay bands and grade pays and merging the two. For sepoys, it seems like a hefty hike. Where you essentially, whatever their basic pay is, you essentially multiply it by about 2.57. Your initial comments, Colonel, before we get into more specific issues.
First of all, Ranjay, my congratulations for your channel for having taken up this issue of the 7th Pay Commission vis-a-vis the OROP. I don't think anybody else is now in a picture to reach up to your levels, yes, stand up to it, because this is something which affects the security of the country.
Right.
All other things flow out of it. So if you are clear about the security of your country, everything else. So therefore, my congratulations for taking up the topic.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Second point, more importantly, I think the armed forces have once again become the knight in shining armor for everybody else. Since we demanded OROP, and they seem to have given it to everybody else.
But be that as it may, sir, they have proposed OROP now, and how do you see it? I mean, they have of course proposed it for everybody, but if you were to look at specifically your case, sir, and the specific sort of criteria that they have tried to meet, keeping in mind your unique sort of arrangement, how do you look at this?
Ranjay, first of all, let me tell you, if they have the money, please give it to everybody.
Right.
I am an Indian, I am a nationalist. If all my brethren, all my citizens get better emoluments, I'll be happier. However, it is not about parity. It is about the edge. The whole question revolves around these two words, parity and edge. Because of the peculiar conditions of the armed forces, the T and C as you call it, being totally different, we have to maintain an edge. There has to be an edge. Therefore, if you want to give everybody everything, then please up the end.
So the edge that you're saying that the military, the defense forces had prior to 1973. Hold your thought there, Colonel. Ajay Shukla, I mean, let me come to you now. You had put out many of the key recommendations of the panel report on Twitter some time back, and it's a googly. Would you say that the fact that they have gone a step further and they've actually proposed OROP for all central government employees?
In case the 7th Pay Commission panel's recommendations on pensions are implemented in full, it would meet several of the demands of the OROP agitation. Now, they recommend two formulae for calculating the pensions. And after the calculations are done in these two different formulae for each pensioner, the one which suits the pensioner better, that's the one which gives the higher pension, is the one that will be implemented. Now, in the first calculation, the calculation will be done on January 1st, 2016, which is when the 7th Pay Commission recommendations are due to be implemented or brought into action. So this bypasses all the earlier issues, the sort of friction that had been created when the government had said that we will fix pensions as the average of pensions drawn in the year 2013, and that we would pay OROP only from July 1st, 2014. This would mean that OROP is effectively paid from 1st of January 2016. So that gets over that earlier demand. And secondly, it is not being calculated as average of pension drawn in 2013. It's being calculated according to the new scales of the 7th Pay Commission. So we have to wait and see what the government does about implementing these 7th Pay Commission recommendations. But if it does implement them the way that they have recommended, I think it will be a good thing that will go down well with the OROP people.
Right, and in fact that is indeed the big question, because initially everybody was expecting that the fiscal hit would be about, owing to the 7th Pay Commission, would be about 0.5% of GDP, but then today of course we got to know it was 0.65% of GDP, and that may have some far-reaching implications. But comment on that, Colonel, because there's an important point Ajay Shukla mentioned, that at least as far as a proposal, we need to emphasize these are proposals right now. Of course we need to see how much of this is accepted by the government, but one issue that you have raised and what's been one of your main bones of contention has been the fact that the manner in which they've tried to arrive the government's definition of OROP in the form in which they proposed in September, of coming up with a mean average, okay, and you wanted to have it at par with the top ranks pay of officers. So in that case, sir, I mean, specifically from the effort that has been made by the 7th Pay Commission, you would have to say that, I mean, the intentions seem to be right.
RONOJOY, intentions may be right. I am not questioning the intention of the 7th Pay Commission. The point at issue is the Koshyari Committee came in 2011.
Right.
Today is 2015. It's taken 4 years to come to this conclusion. And whatever Ajay Shukla might feel about these proposals being considered the way he interprets them, I don't see that in the fine print. If it is there in the fine print, then we'll look at it. But essentially, it implies that the OROP, which was essentially only meant for the armed forces, has now been given to everybody.
Right.
Which is a point of contention all over again.
Right. Is that a fair point of contention, Ajay Shukla? Comment on that. I mean, yes, perhaps it is the defense force, the armed force, the veterans, in fact, who sort of brought in the issue of OROP at least as far as in the center of public discourse, owing to the agitation over the last many months. But hypothetically, let's just say, if the government did indeed have the fiscal headroom, and if they were to go ahead and accept these proposals in their entirety, should the armed forces, I mean, and the veterans really have a grouse about that, considering the fact that now this will be, sort of given to everybody in the central government forces, and not just, the defense personnel?
RONOJOY, I accept and I agree with one thing that Colonel KAUL says, but I don't agree with the other. The point that I agree with is that there is a severe trust deficit between the OROP agitation and the government. The OROP agitation is right in saying that the government has promised us one thing and actually delivered less, and now says that you should be happy with what you've got. And to that extent, I can understand the distrust that Colonel KAUL evinces when he says that we have to read the fine print and we have to see how the government implements this. Everything in this proposal will depend upon the degree to which the government will implement it, and to that extent I agree with Colonel KAUL. Where I don't agree with him is in his point that the army or the military has spearheaded OROP and now everybody else is benefiting, and to that extent the military is being done down. No, there are no losers over here. The military will not lose if OROP is benefited for Central Armed Police Forces and for the civilian employees. In fact, it will make the whole thing more sustainable. It may not make it fiscally sustainable. The government will still have to grapple with the issue of where it's going to get the finance from, but it will certainly make it sustainable in the sense of not having one set of people who believe that injustice is being done to them. In fact, the whole basis of the military demand is that there is injustice because one set of people, civilian employees, are being paid OROP effectively and the military is not. So to that extent, there are only winners here if this is implemented. There will be no losers, and the military should not feel bad if the CATFs get one rank, one pension.
Right. Mr. Colonel, I mean, and that is something that many would be asking tonight. I mean, of course, we are conjecturing here. We need to keep emphasizing the government has not accepted it, but be that as it may. But in principle, the fact is, why should the military or the armed forces have an issue if the same OROP is applied to everybody. As Mr. Shukla was perhaps rightly pointing out, that it might actually be more sustainable, because as soon as the government announced OROP for you, there were, of course, we've seen its ripple effects, where paramilitary forces are also not demanding. So isn't it more sustainable? Financial, fiscal sustainability, we can talk about it later, but in terms of, it's sort of surety, isn't that the right way to go about it, sir?
Ranjit, Colonel Shukla may have his own opinions about this whole subject. I'd like to remind him, go back, my dear, to when you were a squadron commander in the Hodson's Horse, and that man came up to you and said, "Mere ghar mein problem hai, maine ghar jana hai, I wish to leave." And you processed his application, and he went home at less than 35 years of age, with a pension which is peanuts, as compared to the gentleman who you now espouse for in the CAPF, or for that matter civil, who carries on serving till 60 years of age, irrespective of what he has problems or he doesn't have any problems. He gets all the benefits, he gets everything possible, and he carries on till 60 years of age. Where is the comparison? There is no comparison. I mean, I hate to talk about comparison. There's a adage, comparisons are always odious. So please don't, armed forces is a separate entity. Please treat them as such. Let's not get involved. So
specifically now, you said that you wanted the armed forces to keep, maintain its edge and go back to the pre-1973 levels. So what in that, what would be then your specific requirements?
I just give an example. A guy goes home at 35 and the other guy carries on till 60. Differential, 25 years. Misses out on 2 pay commissions. Misses out on 60%. 30% is what has been proposed,
right?
Or 40% is what is going to be accepted, because all the trade unions are going up in arms, and the finance minister will obviously agree to them. But 30% or 40%, whatever, he misses out on. Therefore, that differential is never ever going to be equated unless you allow an edge. And that edge, I feel, is that, okay, give it to everybody.
Right.
Give OROP to everybody, as the 7th Pay Commission has recommended. However, increase the LPD, last pay drawn, of the JC and the other ranks to 90%, and as pension, and officers to 70%. We are happy.
Right. Coming to Ajay Shukla, to you now, to some of the festering issues that still remain as far as the OROP controversy is concerned. Clearly, despite government coming out in September and approving its own form of OROP, it has not sort of met the expectations of the armed forces and the veterans. Specifically, so one big issue has been about the fact that the government has said pension parity will only come in after 5 years and not every year. So how do you see the two camps reaching a middle ground? I mean, it seemed that the government was making some, and they had accepted OROP. The Prime Minister had promised earlier, and they were making some sort of making some progress. But it has not satisfied the protesting veterans. Is there room, sir, for any sort of middle ground now, considering the fact that it seems both have sort of pushed themselves to the edge of the wall?
Ronojoy, there are 7 points, the key points that the ex-servicemen group said, in which the government's announcement of OROP, or the form of OROP that they were willing to pay out, fell short of what they had initially promised. Now, these 7 points need to be examined carefully, and you will find in them that there are some points that actually relate to OROP, that is one rank, one pension. And there are some points that actually don't relate to OROP but relate to the date from which pension will be paid and so on, which are subsidiary issues, I would call them. Now, when you look at this issue of pension equalization being done once in 5 years, now that directly violates OROP, because after 5 years, for one day, pensions will be equalized, and then they will start for the next 5 years falling in different categories, and it will be one rank, many pensions. So to that extent, I think the ex-servicemen's agitation has a very powerful point there, and the government will have to address those concerns if it wants the ex-servicemen to come around. But I think that there is negotiating headroom in some of the other demands. You know, for example, whether the average of pension drawn in the year 2010, 2013 should be paid, or whether it should be paid from July 1st or March 31st.
Right.
Those are places where arguments can be made and accommodation done.
Right.
But if the government just sticks to its guns and says we are not going to come out and we are not going to talk, then of course there is no meeting ground at all.
Right, right. Thank you, Mr. Shukla. One final word, sir, from you, Colonel. The one big issue that, in fact, even Mr. Shukla raised was this trust deficit, okay, which has been there for quite some time, something that you and I have also spoken offline. Post this, it seems that this is almost a correction of all the past pay panel commission. So, are you hopeful that this trust deficit will be bridged and met?
Would they like to meet us and talk about it? I'm making a statement on national television.
Right.
You remove two anomalies, we are willing to talk. We're willing to lift.
And the two anomalies would be, sir?
One is this calendar year.
Calendar year.
And the second is mean average.
Mean average.
Remove it, we talk.
Well, let's hope that the government is listening to that. Thank you so very much, Colonel Kaul, for joining us on this special. And thank you very much, Ajay Shukla, for joining us on the phone line. So this is going to be one big issue that we will be tracking very closely at our end.